Hello and welcome to Aerospace and Mechanical Lab 2. Today we are going to talk about propeller and fans and the theory behind them just a little bit. In today's lab, we will learn in the propeller and thrust lab. We will learn what is a thrust stand and how to use it. We'll also understand the different theories behind a propeller or fan blade modeling. Then we will move on to understanding the effects of number of the blades, which is essentially something you will do in the lab, and their orientation and size on generation of thrust. And we will test the accuracy of the propeller theories we have learned in this lecture. Okay. The first thing that we need to answer is, what is a propeller? A propeller is a wing-like body that is made up of an airfoil. As you can see, the airfoil section is here. So essentially the idea is when you cut a propeller in half, you will see a geometry like this. These geometries are called airfoils. Propellers are usually twisted like this. There's a twist in this direction, which essentially means that this line, the chord line, changes as you go from the base of the propeller to a tip of it, root of the propeller to the tip of it. And propellers are usually almost parallel to the free stream velocity that is approaching the power. So essentially they are usually parallel to the flow. Propellers are used everywhere. They're used in fans, they're used in aircraft engines, they are used in compressors, turbines, and pumps, as you can see here in the two examples of an axial flow pump and a centrifugal flow pump. The difference between the two, they both use different types of propellers, but one changes the direction of the flow as well as adding energy to it. The other one just adds energy to the flow so it can move to a further location. All of these are done by designing appropriate propellers for a pump, for a fan, for an aircraft engine, for a lot of different applications. Okay. But why do we use propellers, or what do the propellers do? They have two jobs. One is to add energy to a passing fluid. This use of the propeller is used in aircraft engines, compressors, and pumps. So whenever you want to add energy to a moving fluid through rotating an object, you have to use a propeller. And the second application of the propellers is in cases where we want to extract energy from a passing fluid, which is usually the job of a turbine. You have an inlet of higher energy material that passes through your propeller, rotates your propeller, and that is going to cause energy generation, electrical energy generation. Okay. But how can we analyze the power or energy that is added to the system or extracted from the system? The idea is the power of the propellers rotating is equal to kinetic power jump in the system or kinetic power reduction, essentially kinetic power change in the system before and after a propeller. So delta of the kinetic energy is equal to the power of the propeller. In mechanical engineering applications, we usually focus on the power of the propeller rotation, but in aerospace engineering applications, we also focus on the force that is added to your system, essentially the force of the propeller, which is added to your fluid system, that is called thrust. Okay, so in this lab we are going to focus on the thrust as specifically because we have force cells that are designed to measure the thrust generated by a propeller. So the idea is you use this theoretical framework to calculate thrust using this theoretical framework for your own propeller, and then measure the thrust using the thrust sense and compare the two with each other. But how can we have a theoretical framework that help us calculate the thrust force generated by the propellers? And analyzing the power and force in a propeller is very complicated because the geometry of a propeller is very complicated. But if we have a system level design if you have a system level perspective to the system, meaning that if you look at just the energy transfer between the system, we can simplify the propeller analysis, and we can just look at the propeller, treat the propeller as a disk that adds energy to your fluid system. If you apply this lens, you can find the force of the propeller or force of the disk. Let's imagine this is equal to delta P, the pressure difference between the downstream and the upstream propeller of the propeller multiplied by the surface area covered by this disk, the total surface area covered by the propellers. And delta P can also be equal to the kinetic energy jump, as we said. So it is half of density, half multiplied by density multiplied by the exhaust velocity, which is the velocity after the propeller, minus the initial velocity. This is a velocity before the propeller. Okay. So we can also calculate thrust using the momentum difference before and after the propeller. How do we calculate momentum? Momentum is m multiplied by velocity. Rate of momentum can be calculated using mass flow rate multiplied by the velocity. So the total net force that is generated by the propeller using this theory can be calculated to be m dot exhaust velocity minus initial velocity. Again, m dot is the mass flow rate in your system. Exhaust velocity is the velocity of air. In our scenario, specifically, we are going to use air that is exiting your propeller system. So a velocity here, and the velocity, the initial velocity, that is a velocity here. Okay, so how do we calculate the mass flow rate? We can multiply our density by the velocity of the propeller by the area of the cross-sectional area of the disk of our whole propeller geometry. Using this formula for the mass flow rate, we can find the thrust force to be equal to density multiplied by the velocity of the propeller multiplied by pi r squared multiplied by exhaust velocity minus the inlet velocity. So for these calculations, we need to know the rotation of the propeller, first of all, to calculate the linear velocity using that rotation velocity, the angular velocity. We need to measure the exhaust velocity, and the initial velocity is 0 in our case because the propeller is standing, is not moving, so the flight velocity is essentially 0. And if you do the thrust calculations, you can measure the efficiency of a propeller by dividing the thrust multiplied by the V infinity, your free resting velocity. You can use exhaust velocity here, divided by the power that is provided to your propeller. So essentially we have to measure the power of the propeller that is provided by the electrical outlet to the propeller. This comparison is going to tell us how much of the power that is given to the propeller is actually converted to the thrust force. It is converted to energy of the air, right? With this, is going to help us find the losses of the system. This was a very short lecture. This was it. I just wanted to cover the theory of the propellers. I will post another video talking about the lab itself and what kind of measurements, what type of measurements, and what kind of calculations we need to do in the lab itself.